The galaxy was vast, ruled by ancient empires that spanned millennia. The Galactic Council, an institution created by the most powerful and advanced civilizations, was the seat of their collective might. Each member represented a race with a history of conquest, diplomacy, and technological supremacy. They saw themselves as the rulers of the stars, their dominance unquestioned, their decisions absolute. In their eyes, war was merely a means to settle disputes or assert dominance, never a threat to their existence. To them, war was something they controlled, a tool wielded with precision, calculated down to the last detail. It had been that way for as long as anyone could remember. Then came Earth. Humanity had only recently joined the ranks of the Galactic Council, barely a blip on the cosmic radar. They were newcomers, barely out of their infancy in terms of interstellar travel, compared to the ancient empires that surrounded them. To the Council, Earth was an amusing curiosity, primitive, unrefined, and most importantly, weak. They weren't worth worrying about. Humanity's place on the Council had been a gesture of inclusion, a symbol of the Council's so-called diversity. But behind closed doors, the other members mocked Earth's leaders, ridiculing their lack of sophistication and their reliance on rudimentary technologies. Among the most arrogant of these empires was the Aetherian Dominion, an imperial power that had spent centuries expanding its borders, consuming weaker civilizations without breaking a sweat. Their fleets were massive, their soldiers hardened by countless campaigns, and their technology was unmatched. When the Aetherians set their sights on a small human colony on the edge of the galaxy, it seemed like an inevitable outcome. Earth's pitiful forces stood no chance, they thought. The Aetherians were going to claim the planet without even needing to fire a shot. Earth, however, had a different perspective. The warnings came swiftly, but they were ignored just as quickly. "Don't start a war you can't win," the humans said. That was the message they sent to the Aetherian Dominion and, by extension, the entire Galactic Council. The words rippled through the halls of the council chambers, but the only response was laughter. The idea that humans, could win any war, let alone one against the Aetherians, was absurd. The council dismissed the message as nothing more than the desperate bluff of a species too foolish to know its place. In the grand scheme of galactic politics, Earth's leaders were viewed as naive, grasping at bravado to mask their fear. The Aetherian representative, an imposing figure who oozed confidence, publicly mocked the warning. "They think they can resist us?" he scoffed. "Let them try." In the Council's eyes, the Aetherians were simply teaching a lesson, a demonstration of what happens when a lesser species tries to stand in the way of galactic progress. The rest of the members watched with amusement, fully expecting the humans to fold the moment they saw the size of the invading fleet. The Aetherian Dominion moved swiftly, their ships cutting through space like predators hunting down easy prey. On board the Dominion's flagship, the mood was celebratory. This was going to be a quick and effortless victory, just another conquest to add to the Empire's long list of subjugated worlds. The fleet commander, a veteran of countless battles, was already looking ahead, planning the next expansion after the humans were dealt with. As far as he was concerned, Earth had overstepped its bounds by even daring to send a warning. But Earth did not back down. Instead, preparations were being made. The humans didn't have the technology or the resources that the Aetherians possessed, but what they did have was something far more dangerous: determination. For centuries, humanity had been underestimated, time and again, by forces that believed themselves superior. But humanity had always found a way to survive, to adapt, and to overcome. This time would be no different. The Aetherian fleet reached the human colony without resistance. From orbit, the planet looked peaceful, untouched by war. It would have been easy to assume that the humans had surrendered before the battle even began. The fleet commander smiled to himself, imagining the fear that must have gripped the colony's leaders as they awaited their inevitable doom. But when the commander gave the order to commence the invasion, something unexpected happened. The humans fought back. At first, the resistance seemed insignificant, small, scattered skirmishes from planetary defense systems that should have been outdated by centuries. But something about the way the humans fought was different. Their tactics were unpredictable, their responses coordinated in ways that the Etherians hadn't anticipated. What should have been a simple planetary occupation was turning into something more complicated. The Etherians began to lose ships, not many, but enough to make them pause. The flagship scanners detected patterns in the human defenses, strategies that weren't supposed to exist in a species this primitive. The fleet commander grew uneasy. This wasn't how the invasion was supposed to go. There should have been no resistance at all, and yet here they were, losing ships to a species that shouldn't have posed any threat. In the council chambers, the laughter began to die down, replaced by murmurs of confusion. How were the humans holding their ground? The Etherians doubled their efforts, pouring more resources into the assault, convinced that the human resistance would crumble if they just pushed harder. But the harder they pushed, the stronger the resistance became. Earth's forces were still vastly outnumbered, but they fought with a ferocity and cunning that caught the Etherians off guard. The human colony was not falling. It was holding, and in some places, it was even pushing back. By now, the Galactic Council had stopped laughing. What had started as a sideshow had become a spectacle of its own. The other members, who had been content to watch humanity's inevitable downfall, were now paying close attention. The arrogance in their eyes began to waver, replaced by the first hints of doubt. Was it possible that the humans could actually fight back? The Etherian representative, who had been so quick to mock Earth's warning, found himself growing increasingly silent. The council chambers were filled with reports of the ongoing battle, each one more unsettling than the last. The Etherian fleet was losing ground. The losses were small, but they were significant. This wasn't supposed to happen. Humanity wasn't supposed to have the strength to resist an empire like the Etherian Dominion. And yet, they were doing exactly that. It was at this point that Earth issued another message, this one broadcasted not just to the Etherians, but to the entire galaxy. "We warned you," it said. "Do not force our hand." The council fell into silence. While the galaxy turned a blind eye, humans mobilized with a silent resolve that caught no one's attention, except the Etherians, who foolishly ignored it. The human colony targeted by the Etherians wasn't unprotected, nor were Earth's forces as outdated as the rest of the galaxy believed. Over the years, humans had quietly developed advanced defensive technologies, built not for open aggression but for survival, for endurance. Knowing they could never match the galactic powers ship for ship, they focused on building weapons and defenses meant for a war of attrition, a long, grinding conflict that would wear down even the mightiest enemy. The galaxy believed that Earth's progress had been slow, but it had been methodical, deliberate, and above all, underestimated. When the Etherians finally launched their first strike on the colony, they expected a slaughter. Their fleet was massive, a spectacle of Etherian engineering and power, bristling with advanced weaponry, shields, and ships that dwarfed the relatively small human fleet. The Dominion's War Council had assured their leaders that the humans would crumble at the sight of such overwhelming force. In their arrogance, they broadcast the entire invasion to the Galactic Council, expecting the event to serve as a warning to any species foolish enough to defy the Etherians. It was meant to be a show of strength, a swift and glorious conquest that would remind everyone of their place in the galactic hierarchy. But what unfolded shocked everyone. The Etherians' fleets descended upon the human colony with precision, the vanguard moving to crush planetary defenses with the ease they were accustomed to. But something was wrong. Instead of fleeing or surrendering, the humans fought back, harder and smarter than anyone had anticipated. The first wave of Etherian ships met with heavy resistance, encountering planetary defense systems far more sophisticated than expected. Hidden orbital cannons fired energy projectiles that pierced the shields of Etherian warships, while stealthy surface-based weapons struck at weak points in their formations. The humans fought in a way that was completely outside of the Aetherian playbook, unpredictable, unrelenting. The Aetherian commanders, having believed this battle would be over in a matter of minutes, found themselves in a prolonged struggle. Despite their overwhelming numbers and superior firepower, the Aetherians were taking casualties. It wasn't the volume of losses that concerned them but the precision of the human strikes. The humans seemed to know exactly where to hit, exploiting every flaw in the Aetherian strategies. Their resistance wasn't just tenacious, it was effective. As the Aetherian fleet struggled to gain control, human ground forces and defense installations worked in seamless coordination, using guerrilla tactics and unconventional strategies to harass and destabilize the invading forces. They lured the Aetherians into traps, used the planet's terrain to their advantage, and deployed unmanned drones that swarmed Aetherian formations with a lethal efficiency that the invaders had never seen before. The humans didn't fight in the way the Aetherians had come to expect from lesser species. They weren't reacting with panic or desperation. They were fighting with precision, with strategy, with purpose. The Galactic Council, watching the broadcast unfold in real time, was stunned into silence. What had begun as a spectator event, something for the elites to laugh at and mock, had turned into something much more serious. The Aetherians were still winning, but the human resistance was far fiercer and far more effective than anyone had anticipated. The longer the battle dragged on, the more the council members began to wonder, had they underestimated humanity? For the Aetherians, this was no longer about crushing a small colony. It was about salvaging their pride. They doubled down, sending reinforcements, throwing more ships and resources into the fray, determined to overwhelm the human defenders by sheer force of numbers. But the humans adapted. Every move the Aetherians made, the humans countered with something unexpected. The battle, which should have been over hours ago, stretched into days. The humans had one more message for the galaxy, and they made sure everyone heard it. "You've been warned. Do not force our hand." The council dismissed it, believing that, despite the humans' impressive defense, they had only delayed the inevitable. The Aetherians had too many ships, too many soldiers, too much power. In the end, the humans would lose, just as every other species who had dared to defy the galactic order had lost before them. But deep down, in the back of their minds, some of the council members began to feel a sliver of doubt. The Aetherian fleet was still there, but they were taking losses, real losses. Ships that had never been defeated in combat were now debris, scattered across the atmosphere of the human colony. The broadcast showed the wreckage, the bodies, the battle-scarred landscapes. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The Aetherians were still the stronger force, but for how long? How many more resources would they need to commit to this fight? How many more lives? The humans, it seemed, weren't going to break. They weren't just resisting, they were adapting, learning, and countering every move the Aetherians made. And the more they fought, the more the galaxy began to realize that maybe, just maybe, the humans weren't as helpless as they had been led to believe. The battle raged on, but the message was clear: humanity would not go down easily. They had warned the galaxy, and now, as the Aetherians continued their futile assault, the cost of underestimating Earth was becoming more apparent by the hour. The Galactic Council still refused to believe that the humans could win, but they were no longer laughing. Doubt had begun to creep into their minds, and for the first time, the invincible facade of the galactic powers showed cracks. Back on the human colony, Earth was far from resting on its laurels. The battle had been a warning, not just to the Aetherians, but to the entire galaxy. Humanity had long been underestimated, but now they were showing their teeth. While the Aetherians plotted their next move, Earth's military command was already several steps ahead. They knew the next wave would be even larger, more determined. The Aetherians wouldn't make the same mistakes twice. So, instead of waiting for the hammer to fall, humanity prepared to strike first. Earth had kept many of its military capabilities hidden, concealed from the prying eyes of the Galactic Council. There was no reason to reveal everything in a galaxy that considered them irrelevant. But now, that concealment was an advantage. While the Etherians expected a traditional war of attrition, where numbers and brute force would determine the outcome, humanity had other plans. Guerrilla warfare had long been a specialty of Earth's militaries, fighting smart, hitting the enemy where they were weakest, and disappearing before retaliation could land. The Etherians, for all their technological prowess, were not prepared for this kind of war. The Etherian fleet returned in full force, this time with double the ships, double the firepower. Their commanders had no doubts about victory. After all, the humans could only be lucky for so long. But what they didn't know was that Earth's fleets, though smaller, had already begun their counteroffensive. Before the Etherian ships could even reach the colony, human strike teams were cutting off their supply lines, sabotaging their infrastructure, and striking key outposts deep within Etherian space. This was not the war the Etherians had prepared for. Their fleets were used to full frontal assaults, massive battles where the outcome was determined by the size of your armada. But the humans weren't playing by those rules. They struck hard and fast, retreating before the Etherians could muster a proper response. Communications arrays went dark, supply ships were ambushed and destroyed, and vital fuel depots exploded in a series of coordinated strikes that left the Etherians reeling. Each loss was a small blow on its own, but combined, they began to take a serious toll on the Dominion's war effort. The Galactic Council, watching from their ivory towers, started to take notice. What had once been seen as an entertaining sideshow was now becoming a full-blown conflict. The Etherians, one of the galaxy's most powerful empires, were being frustrated by a species they had dismissed as insignificant. Many still believed that the humans would eventually be crushed, but doubts were beginning to creep in. If Earth could hold its own against the Dominion for this long, what else were they capable of? The Etherians, however, still refused to believe they could lose. Their leaders pushed forward with renewed vigor, gathering their largest fleet yet for a final, overwhelming strike. This time, they would obliterate the human colony and be done with it. They would show the galaxy that the Etherian Dominion was still the supreme power in the stars. But humanity, ever resourceful, had one more surprise in store. Earth had always been full of surprises. Though they were a younger species on the galactic stage, their history was steeped in conflict, innovation, and survival against all odds. Deep in the bowels of Earth's military command, hidden from the prying eyes of the galaxy, lay a secret weapon, a relic from humanity's darkest hours, built during a time when survival was uncertain, and nothing was off the table. It was a weapon born out of desperation, refined in secret, and now, ready to be unleashed. When the Etherians' final fleet arrived, it was greeted not with desperation, but with calm determination. Earth's forces, fewer in number, stood resolute, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The battle began as the Etherians had expected, an overwhelming barrage of firepower, designed to wipe the humans off the map. But then, something changed. Out of the void of space, human warships appeared, different from anything the Etherians had faced before. These were no mere ships. They moved with precision, their hulls shimmering with energy fields the likes of which no alien species had ever seen. At first, the Etherians believed it to be a trick, some form of human bravado designed to intimidate. But when the first volley hit, the devastation was absolute. The humans had unleashed a weapon of unimaginable power, a form of energy manipulation that bypassed the Etherians' shields entirely. It cut through their fleets like a hot knife through butter. In mere minutes, dozens of Etherian ships were reduced to floating debris, their commanders left scrambling to make sense of what had just happened. This wasn't just a battle anymore, it was a massacre. The Etherians had never faced anything like this. Their once invincible fleet, the pride of their empire, was being obliterated. Panic spread like wildfire. Ships that had been confident in their victory moments ago were now fleeing, desperately trying to escape the human onslaught. The Galactic Council, watching the battle unfold in real time, was left speechless. Humanity had turned the tide of the war in a single, devastating engagement. The news spread quickly throughout the galaxy. Humanity, the species everyone had laughed at, the species the Council had deemed unimportant, had just decimated one of the most powerful fleets in existence. What was once laughter had now turned to confusion, then fear. If humans could do this to the Etherians, what else were they capable of? Across the galaxy, other civilizations began to take notice. Species that had once sat comfortably on the sidelines, content to let the Etherians crush Earth, were now rethinking their positions. Some even began reaching out to Earth, cautiously offering alliances, realizing that humanity was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The Etherian Dominion, once so sure of its dominance, now found itself facing an enemy it could no longer underestimate. For the first time, the galaxy feared Earth. Humanity had unleashed its fury, and the galaxy would never forget it. The once proud empire had gone from underestimating Earth to scrambling for survival. Desperation gripped them, and in a final, desperate act, they reached out to the Galactic Council, begging for assistance. The Council, previously content to watch the conflict unfold with amusement, now realized that the stakes had shifted dramatically. This was no longer a localized skirmish. It was a war that threatened the entire balance of power. In response to the Etherians' plea, the largest coalition fleet in the history of the galaxy was assembled. Hundreds of ships from the most powerful civilizations gathered in orbit around the Dominion's capital, their combined forces representing a staggering display of galactic might. This coalition had every reason to believe they could finally end the human threat. They had the numbers, the technology, the experience. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for the inevitable end of humanity's resistance. But Earth had seen this coming. For decades, humanity had been preparing, quietly and carefully, developing technologies that no alien species had even conceived of. Their military planners had anticipated this exact scenario, an overwhelming coalition, united in its desire to crush the humans once and for all. This was the moment they had prepared for, the moment when they would unleash everything they had kept hidden. What the galaxy did not understand, what the Etherians had never comprehended, was that humanity's strength lay not only in its weapons but in its relentless resolve. The humans would never stop fighting, not until the very last breath. As the coalition fleet closed in, Earth launched its own armada. It wasn't the largest fleet in the galaxy, but it didn't need to be. Every ship was outfitted with cutting-edge technology, the culmination of humanity's most advanced scientific achievements. AI-controlled warships, capable of adapting to enemy tactics in real time, led the charge. Energy weapons that bent the laws of physics tore through the fabric of space, striking with pinpoint accuracy. And then there were the relics from humanity's wartime past, massive, ancient weapons systems that had been dormant for centuries, now reactivated and more powerful than ever before. The coalition fleet, despite its overwhelming numbers, was unprepared for the sheer ferocity and precision of humanity's attack. In the opening minutes of the battle, dozens of alien ships were destroyed before they could even react. The humans struck fast and hard, their tactics unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Every move was calculated, every strike devastating. The coalition commanders, many of them arrogant in their superiority, were caught off guard. They had expected a conventional fight, a slow grind that they would eventually win by attrition. But humanity had no intention of playing by those rules. As the battle raged, the true extent of humanity's power became clear. One by one, the alien fleets began to falter. Their commanders, who had entered the conflict with such confidence, now found themselves facing an enemy that was both relentless and unstoppable. Human ships moved with terrifying precision, coordinating their attacks in a way that left no room for error. Every time the coalition tried to regroup or launch a counteroffensive, the humans were already there, striking at their weakest points. Within hours, the coalition fleet began to collapse. Panic spread like wildfire through the alien ranks. Ships broke formation, fleeing in all directions as the humans continued their relentless assault. What had once been a proud armada, the greatest the galaxy had ever seen, was now reduced to scattered, fleeing remnants. The few ships that managed to escape would carry with them stories of the horror they had faced, stories that would send shockwaves through the rest of the galaxy. As the dust settled, the galaxy stood in stunned silence. The once mighty Etherian dominion was in ruins, its capital reduced to rubble, its fleets obliterated. The Galactic Council, powerless to stop the carnage, was left to pick up the pieces. But the real consequence of the battle wasn't just the destruction of the Dominion. It was the realization that humanity was no longer a species to be trifled with. The aliens who had once laughed at Earth's warning now trembled in fear. The surviving alien civilizations, once so certain of their superiority, now faced a new reality. Their empires, once thought unassailable, were crumbling under the weight of humanity's unstoppable wrath. The Galactic Council, which had once treated Earth as little more than an amusing sideshow, now found itself grappling with the consequences of its arrogance. No longer did they see humanity as a primitive, backward species. Now they saw humanity for what it truly was, a force to be reckoned with. Across the galaxy, governments scrambled to reevaluate their diplomatic strategies. Species that had once mocked Earth were now sending envoys, desperate to establish peaceful relations with the humans before it was too late. Fear gripped the galaxy, fear of what humanity might do next, fear of their anger, and fear of the unknown capabilities they had yet to reveal. The laughter had died. Now, all that remained was silence and dread. As the Galactic Council attempted to rebuild in the aftermath of the battle, Earth delivered its final message. It was simple, direct, and chilling in its brevity. "We warned you. Never start a war you can't win." The words echoed across the stars, a reminder to every civilization that had underestimated humanity. The galaxy had laughed at that warning once. Now, it wept in the shadow of its defeat. In the end, the lesson was clear. Humanity, once thought weak, had proven its strength in the most brutal way imaginable. They had fought, they had persevered, and they had won. The galaxy, once filled with arrogance and mockery, now trembled in the face of Earth's unstoppable wrath. For the first time in its history, the galaxy understood what it meant to fear humanity. The moral of the story is simple: when underestimated, humans rise. Through sheer will, creativity, and determination, they turned the tide of a war that was never supposed to be theirs to win. The galaxy's laughter had been silenced, replaced by tears of defeat and regret. And now, the lesson was clear: when you push humanity too far, there is no coming back.